We're talking about what's intuition, right? How do you know in decision making, how do you know you're going by your intuition versus craving? And do we all have an intuition, right? So I think it would be good to give a context of why we were talking about this.
Well, I'll let you give the context, but I think for us as physicians, what's relevant here is that we end up having to make decisions in life many times, and we follow a very strict path in the beginning where it's laid out for us. We study, we take the next test, our loans pay for our lifestyle, and so there's not a lot of decision making, there's not a lot of regret. Each one decision leads to another decision, and all of a sudden in the end you end up with generally a good outcome. You become a doctor, but then all of a sudden you realize that life doesn't work that way. Life is not a bunch of linear decisions that then lead to the exact outcome that you want, but instead I think it's about constantly reimagining the choices and having to really think through, is this the life that I want to live, and are these the right choices for me? Because if we don't, then I think we end up very miserable, we end up depressed, and then we make our patients depressed, we make other doctors depressed, we make other human beings depressed. And so decision making is an integral part of life. And then I think the context.
Yeah, so decision making, we always hear of like decision fatigue, fear of missing out, when it comes to decisions. So decision making is kind of a big deal and like talked about a lot. So the context of why we were talking about this is just small decisions actually, of like right now we are traveling a lot, we are able to live in different places, and so with that comes decisions about like, okay, where are we going next? Do I want to go back home? Do I want to start working? You know, for you, some of the decisions were like, do I want to pick up some shifts, urgent care shifts? Do I want to, you know, have a physical practice, or be more online dedicated? And for me, decision was, do I want to go back home where we have a more permanent, or we have a base, kind of like miss it, I kind of feel like I want to go home. You felt like you wanted to stay where we are, which is Italy, a little bit longer.
Well, Paris right now.
Yeah.
We're traveling to Paris. We're in Paris for a week.
Right.
But we're living right now the past couple of months.
We're staying
in Bologna.
In Bologna, but we came to visit my family, my aunt here. So, and
I think for you a decision came as to like, you know, am I done with traveling? We started traveling June of 2024. July 2024, we left the US, we went to Canada, we went to New York, we did some horse and dog sitting for those of you who followed us, and then we moved to Iran for a few months, and we were living there, and then we're like, well, it was only going to be a few months, and then we said, okay, maybe go back to the US, and instead we kind of decided, all right, let's just do Italy also, and then we're done. And of course, as things work out, like you just had this opportunity to go stay in Thailand for quite some time.
Yeah, so I have family in Thailand. There's a big event that one of my family members is having, so a bunch of my other families going there. It's going to be a big thing. And I had really decided, okay, I want to go back to Long Beach. I want to go back home. And so now it's like, oh man, like they're all going to be there. Do I want to go there? And then I said, no, you know what, I want to go home. And then Mo says, I kind of want to stay in Italy a little bit longer. We were able to stay another month with the visa. And so then I'm like, what, am I going to go to Long Beach and just be by myself and then look at photos of my family in Thailand, or Mo telling me, yeah, I went to our favorite cafe, and like feel really like depressed and alone. And so we started talking about this decision making, and we were talking about like Mo was telling me how we make our decisions differently, and
maybe explain why it was so hard for you to make this decision.
Well, so one of the things that I realized was that I am really in fear. So one is fear of like either feeling lonely and depressed and kind of regretful, sitting in our apartment alone and thinking like, man, or fear of missing out of this big event that my family's all part of, seeing their photos, all having fun together. So then I realized I am trying to make a decision with so much fear of the consequence of essentially how I'm going to feel. The fear of what I'm going to feel in the future. Yes.
And I think for anybody listening to this, try to put yourself in our shoes before maybe thinking, oh, you have it so good. Right. Come on, how difficult can it be? But I think many of you are actually hoping that in a few years you're going to save enough money and you're going to get to this point where you get to travel. Maybe you're going to be empty nesters, maybe you're dinks, and you're going to just go out on your...
Dual income.
No kids.
No kids.
And you're going to go out on your own and travel, and everything's going to be beautiful because you have the money and you get to choose wherever you want to go. And so put yourself in the shoes of actually being there and now living that life where day to day you're going to make a decision. How do I exercise? How do I make sure I'm eating well? How do I keep my social network, my friends, my social community alive? How do we relate to each other romantically in a partnership, so that you want to go do your thing, I want to go do my thing? And those are decisions that become much more inflated when you travel, and in fact a lot simpler when you have a kind of a smaller 1 mile circle of things that you do. And I think for both of us, this was a choice, for sure, right? This is we realized that we can do this, and so we're going to do it. But at the same time, I think we think about stuff very differently. And at the base, at the core of this, to me, is that the more options you have in life, after a very finite amount, you actually become more depressed, and things become much more complicated, and life can get very complex very quickly. A few choices are necessary for us in this structured society to survive and prosper. But I think beyond that, when you start thinking, we could not work for many years if we wanted to. We could go and stay in Thailand for a while. We could have stayed in Iran. We could buy a place here in Paris and just stay here. We could go back to Long Beach. We could go buy a house in Long Beach. We can go and just work. We could go work for free. We could go volunteer. We could go home exchange, right? And so I think that the core of it is having so many options. And
it's not because we are loaded and super rich, but it's ultimately within the means of how we live, we could do a lot of those things that you said.
I think
maybe not buy
an
apartment in Paris, but
I think it's about options. I think it's the fact that we have options. So some people who are very poor, in fact, suddenly have a lot more option because they're not relegated to having to live life a certain way. So they're free, but now all of a sudden they're suffering. So I don't think it's about wealth. I think it's about the opportunity and options. And it's not about buying an apartment here in Paris. It's not really financial.
I think that this. And of course, when you put yourself out there online, I think to talk about something, because it was me and him talking about it, and we right now don't have a commitment to any job, or having to go somewhere, thank God right now, a sick parent that we have to go to take care of, or something. We have freedom, right? And with that gives you choices, and with choices, then that's when we come to this discussion of how do you make a decision? Because I think how I've been trained to make a decision, how I feel more like I am this responsible person if I make a decision, is to really analyze decisions, really think through everything as logically as I can. And a lot of times what I end up doing is, and I've gotten, thank God, better, because minute things in my life would take me hours to make a decision, right? In a way, you think, you become a doctor, you make decisions. No, a lot of times as doctors, we follow protocols. Rheumatoid arthritis, first line of therapy, unless you have hepatitis C, is methotrexate. It's not that much of a decision making. Yes, for sure, in rheumatology, there's areas of art and creativity. But a lot of times my decision issues are just little things in life. And so here I am kind of just turning things over, and then I find myself while I'm doing this that I'm kind of not happy. Why am I in this just kind of like already depressed, and I'm worried about being depressed in the future.
Just to have to make a decision.
Right, just to make the decision, because these decisions then are taking me mentally into little dark areas of like self-blame, like why are you so like this, look at you. And then, so talking to Mo, and I have seen you make some big and small decisions. We've been like living together and spending majority of our time together for the past 5 years. And so I'm asking him, like, how do you make decisions? And he's bringing up intuition. And we had talked about this one other time as well. And I'm like, what the fuck is intuition? Like, how do I know I'm going by intuition or not?
Right, how do you make a decision based on intuition versus hardcore analysis, right? Like using a bunch of data to then decide like this is the right way forward. And I don't think I'm definitely not somebody who thinks there's one way to do it that's right. If you've been somebody who's made decisions using a pro-con list, then maybe that works for you, right? But I feel like the more I live life, the older I become, we're both about 46 or so, it's the idea that I'm going to take a bunch of facts and make my decision and then make more decisions based on that decision doesn't work for me. It hasn't worked for me. In fact, I was telling Nilu that you almost get to this point where you're using facts to make decisions, and then that decision means you don't get to do something else. So you got the fear of missing out, and you got regrets. But the facts that you're using are not necessarily facts, right? You're thinking, I should go back to Long Beach because I think I'll be happier there. I just need to go back. I really miss that apartment. And that's a fact in your head, right? Because you assume that if you leave this space of chaos, you're going to go to a place where things are going to be calmer and quieter. Then you actually go to that place. And sometimes you might realize, like, fuck, there's so much drama here. Burst pipe, drama with family, crazy neighborhood issues. All of a sudden, those things come to life.
And I think ultimately, like, the way I'm trying to make this decision is, even the analysis is, I'm imagining myself like in Long Beach. Then I imagine myself looking at photos of my family in Thailand, thinking like, oh, I'll be depressed, so maybe I should go to Thailand. Then I imagine myself in Thailand and I feel like I'm so tired from traveling, I'm already overwhelmed. They probably want to go here, they want to go to the beach. I don't like going to the beach. What am I doing? So no, I want to be in Long Beach. It's a cozy, homey space of creative. Then I go back there and I imagine you telling me, oh yeah, I went to, this library that you and I like, this whatever, and I'm like, I'm an idiot. So it's like this back and forth of two imaginary situations to try to figure out what I want to do. And ultimately, I think one of the things that when we started talking about intuition, and I asked him, like, what do you go by? What does intuition mean? Like, tell me again, like, what does it mean to go to make your decision based off an intuition? What does that mean?
So another way for me to think about intuition is gut feeling, something that I can't really argue against. So for example, a fact might be, I'm going to go take this job and I'm going to make a lot of money. So it makes sense for me to give up this other job. And but then I can make 20 arguments against that this job has a longer commute, or for the Long Beach situation that I might have more suffering. The intuition, the gut feeling, is something that I feel is right based on the life that I've lived so far and the aspects of that life that I like. If you're in a place in life where I think you're suffering and you hate your life and you hate yourself, you can't really make gut instinct decisions. You cannot make instinctual, deep, core, seated decisions. You have to make a lot of superficial decisions. But if for the most part, and I've seen you, I've interacted with you, you for the most part are a pleasant person. Other people love you, and you like yourself. Like there's things about you that you're content. You're living this life that actually has kind of like this big picture thing about it, right? And so there is an intuition, because you can't get to that without some sort of intuition, without some sort of like sixth sense.
So I guess what I get out of what you're saying is that, and what you said to me, we think everybody has this ability to, everybody has intuition, right?
Intuit, yeah.
But the more that you follow this sort of intuition, which you also gut feeling, the more it'll develop.
It's a practice.
You're saying that if I'm living a life like
That's
by our
aligned with
lives.
what you like.
Right.
That's aligned
I've
with...
already quit the job that I had felt burnt out in, or making certain decisions. You're saying it's safe to say that you have developed this intuition,
Sure.
right? Now the question becomes, one of the things that I was saying is that, okay, so what is this intuition? If it's a feeling, and most saying no, it's not a feeling, even though we call it a gut feeling, it's not a feeling, because you can have a thought, and usually feelings or emotions come from a thought, right? So you have the thought of something, then you're left with an emotion. So it's not that, right?
If I have a thought that if I feel like somebody's saying something to me because they're trying to insult me, I'm going to get the feeling of being insulted. Defensive. And the fact is, I don't know what that person really was, their intent was. So I'm going to create this thing. And so I think when we go with feelings, there's often a thought, like if I go to Long Beach, it's going to be like this, or it's going to be like that, or I'm going to have FOMO because I didn't go to Bologna, I didn't stay in Bologna. So I have a thought, and that thought creates a feeling. So if I make my decisions based on that, on any given day, your decision might be all over the place. But intuition and the gut feeling means that I've stripped all of that away. And I'm really just going with...
When you say you've stripped all of that away, does it mean...
I've recognized that I have a thought, and I've recognized that thought's creating feelings. I've recognized that I'm creating all these different scenarios and trying to one by one chop them up and check them off.
But what you were saying is that gut feeling is actually a lot of times just I want to do this and I don't know why.
Exactly. I think gut feeling, you can't really argue with it. You can't really come and say, but why do I want to do this? What's the reason? And if somebody was to argue with you, your answer is, I don't know, it just feels right.
So I was trying to think of what does my gut feeling say? Just to give you an example in this scenario, right? Like if I had to go by what are the thoughts and emotions say, what the thought is, these thoughts of if I'm here, this is what's going to happen. If I'm there, that's what's going to happen. And so the emotion is fear. So out of that fear, sometimes you are able to make a decision because of fear of missing out or fear, but I'm still left with fear of missing out there, fear of missing out
right.
there. So the emotion is not even helping. So then I was asking, so gut feeling, there is, ever since maybe past few months, 3 months into traveling,
so
I started to have this image would pop up of our home that we've created in Long Beach, and just how cozy and decorated it with the things that I love, and I just want to be in it. I just want to, even now when I say it, I get a little emotional. I just want to be in it. And then I would say, and usually I would feel that when I was tired, if I was
right.
exploring a new area or doing something new,
interacting with new people,
it wouldn't come up as much. But then whenever I was kind of tired, I was like, gosh, I just want to be in Long Beach. And then now even it comes up for me, and I was like, well, maybe it's just, how do I know? So then when I thought, when I have that, and then a thought comes to me oh, you just like being in new places and pretty places, and you just
so you
want
become
to be
self-critical.
So then I feel so that part of me starts saying you're just so superficial, and you just want to be in these pretty places, and you're just gonna go to Long Beach, and you're gonna, and even Mo at one point had told me, but you have felt depressed even there. So then my mind says so then it becomes this really, and that's why I think it becomes this depressed feeling of trying to make a decision, because then it's self-blaming of you're just something is wrong with you.
You're never happy with anything,
right.
Even the best thing you're going to be unhappy with. Sure, a lot of critical self-thought.
When you were saying that intuition is sort of based on just who you've developed as a person, something like that you said, right? So then I was like, what if who I've developed, who I am, is just I shouldn't go by that, and it just really makes you then fear and question your totality of yourself,
yeah.
I shouldn't, and then you just can't trust yourself at all,
right,
you know?
Right.
And I don't want to get emotional, but I think that's when you were mentioning something about this is really normal to when you have the life where you have so many different decisions open
choices
to you, right? you're inevitably can feel kind of like this sort of like overwhelmed, depressed, or think like, oh, like I just kind of like that self-blame, or think or even feel like so overprivileged, like look at you, that voice of like, for me comes up like, look at you, trying to make these decisions, and people that are like dying of like hunger or whatever.
But maybe going back to the piece that makes you feel really emotionally overwhelmed, like makes you emotional, right? It's the piece that where you're doubting whether who you've become and who you are is somebody good or bad. Isn't that true? I wonder, like, where does that come from? What's the source of you having any doubt about who you are, right? I mean, anybody watching this, they might write even some super mean comments, right? Like totally judgmental, negative stuff. There's going to be a lot of positive comments or something.
Not that many people are following you.
Well, the 4 people. So the 4 people who are going to watch this video. There's going to be positive comments. There might be negative comments. And I think if it was all positive comments, and if you grew up in an environment where everyone was always very supportive of you and never had any critical things to say about you, you never got a grade that was anything less than an A, and there was no grade system other than an A, you would always feel positive, you would always feel content, you would always feel like you're whole as a human being and nothing bad can happen. There's no prison system, there's nothing. But we don't live in a world like that. And I feel like because we live in a world where there's punishment, where there's consequences, where you've been hard on yourself to make it, to become a rheumatologist, because of those things, there is almost like you're doubting the things that are true. You're doubting the things that have actually transpired and happened in your life. But if you can even give space to that and like just give it a moment to be like, okay, yeah, so I have some doubts, but when I look at myself, like even without comparing it to anybody else, like you're not trying to hurt an animal, right? You're not trying to take rights away from anybody else. You're not trying to steal from anyone. You're not trying to hurt someone. You're not trying to hurt yourself. There's no evilness about you. You just kind of want to live like an animal wants to live in nature. You just want to live. So if there is nothing else, I don't know, I feel like there's something very pure about that, to like just believe that and leave all of the negative commentary and the judgment for people who might want to post a negative comment about you and your life. Your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your co-workers, other doctors. And I think that criticism, we've internalized it. And so then it's kind of diluted the ability to make a decision that's intuitive. When you wake up, some days you're going to be like, I think I know what I need this morning. I need to start having a tea first, right? Or I know today I need to work out. Don't you think that's intuition? Don't you think like a big part of that?
Right, which I think you can, if you have like this kind of like analytical, mind that wants to like really do the right thing, like you can like go around even questioning that, right? Like I was questioning, like I was like, maybe this just pool, like it's like a pool that I have right now to go to Long Beach, right? And is that intuition? And Mo was like, yeah, maybe that's intuition. That pool could be intuition. And then, but what if it's a craving just for like, oh, this new, like, or,
something new, something different.
And something that you said that reminded me of something that I had heard also in like from like a teacher, it was like this yoga class that had a spiritual aspect. And I remember asking one time, like, how do you know that you're going by your intuition? And the guy said, the guru or the teacher said, you by making a lot of mistakes, the so-called mistakes, and I think that's what I'm trying to prevent, right? Like, oh yeah, like I can't make any mistake. And then, when the mind gets really like analytic, right, you're a mistake, like everything you're doing is a mistake, right? And I think
instead of thinking of it as a mistake, though, don't you think it's a little bit more about like just practicing the art of making a decision based on intuition?
Right. And so I think I was like thinking about how like there is this as the person that I've read right now probably is the closest to you, that witnesses your life and your minute by minute. There's this ease that you seem to have walking through life, like I was telling Mon, like I felt sometimes jealous because I felt like he has a home within him. And I do see you making these decisions, and I think, and you said to me, you said that the first and the second thought are not, when you feel like, when you said, oh, you know what, I kind of want to stay in, like, let's say I might want to stay in Bologna, the first and the second thought are not like positive thoughts. You're like, oh, what are you going to do by yourself? And you lose not, if you lose not here, or like, you
need to go back and make money.
Right, like some things like that. But ultimately, something you said that was really interesting is that when you go by your gut feeling, and I think that because you're really okay with making a mistake, like you bought an apartment in Long Beach, this current apartment that I want to go back to, which is like really crazy right now when I think about it. You bought this apartment without seeing it, from a different country, and you were really, one of your fears was that I don't want to live in that apartment because it looks like shit.
That you wouldn't want to live in that apartment.
Exactly, that I wouldn't want to live in that apartment. But you still, with all those negative thoughts that came up for you, you felt like, just want to just kind of feel like making this decision. Like, it seems to me like the first feeling that comes up, you don't really analyze it, and you're basically kind of like, you get a lot of data, you had him take some videos and you sent it to you and all of that, but you ultimately were like, what's the worst case scenario, or whatever, I'll go and I think it's just less suffering ultimately, and when you're not suffering less, you don't cause suffering on others.
It is less suffering, but I think there is a flaw in looking at the outcome and saying that this is now an apartment that you really love living in.
No, that's the byproduct. I'm not saying, I'm more going by how I perceive you make
and I think that's the important. And I think that's the importance. I think it's being able to just make a decision based on what feels right, and knowing that worst case scenario, it's going to be a mistake, but you made sure that it's not a grave mistake. For example, I think if you saw me spend all of my money on this apartment, I think you would also say like, hey, seems pretty irresponsible. If I were going to spend all my money on this one apartment sight unseen, I might even think that's irresponsible, right? But if it's a small portion of my money, it's probably not a big deal. And so I can then at least say like, yes, this might not be the outcome that I want, but it will be an outcome that's an important part of my life. That's going to teach me something. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to grow from it. Because, in the end, we kind of want to grow, right? Like we want some hardship to have some growth. You and I do exercises, we cook our own food, we do certain things.
Yeah, like I just feel like this way of like making decisions where it's like, I don't know, I just kind of like, I'm getting pulled that way, Like I feel like even as I say it here on an online platform where only 4 people might be watching, I feel like the consensus might be like, that's really irresponsible. You can't, like, that's the voice of someone in my head who's like, you can't just do whatever the hell you want, like you have to like really analyze things. And yet you said something like, when you just follow your gut feeling, you have the sense that you feel bulletproof walking through life. You feel like you just are protected. And I'm like, I don't even understand that. Like, what does that even mean? How is it that like, somehow, because like when you go by your gut feeling, you think that you have, I don't know, actually.
I think it's because you don't doubt yourself. I think you go through life feeling invincible and feeling untouchable and feeling like nobody can take anything away from you, because what you're basing your value and your decisions on is something so deep that nobody can touch, right? Somebody could physically abuse me, somebody could put me in prison, somebody can mentally torture me and stuff like that. Those are all very...
I think that's because you ultimately are not doubting where that gut feeling is coming from. You're not doubting your like your thoughts don't turn against like your core being.
I don't think my thoughts... Yeah, you're right. I don't think my natural thing is to have I used to be in a place where I think my thoughts would turn towards me as an individual and say, what a shitty human being you are, you're such a loser, you're this, you're that, you're ugly, you're this, you're everything, all the negative thoughts that we've kind of, I don't know, over the years have gotten accustomed to. But I don't think those are not there. I think they're just there, they're just very, very quiet. And the reason I think they're not there
they're not that loud.
They're not very loud.
They're there, but they're not that loud.
Exactly. I think I have to go digging for them, and I can find them. If I want to, I can find them. But I think what I'm realizing is that over the years when I decided that if I make my decisions based on how do I do this so that other people are happy. So in fact, I did a YouTube video on drashori.com on the YouTube channel, and I talked about loneliness. Like the way you cure loneliness is not by going out and trying to make a lot of friends and hoping that they'll love you and pay you attention. It's by going out and trying to help as many people and connect with them and help them. And in return, they'll feel something towards you, and now you'll feel less alone. The person said in the comment, like, yeah, but how do you do that without pleasing people? Without trying to be a people pleaser? And it's such an interesting question to me, because I don't know, like a part of me doesn't care if I'm being a people pleaser. If I know what I'm doing is right, if I believe that this is the right thing to do, right? And you and I always talk about this. When we're doing something, we're doing it we want to make sure that it doesn't harm people around us. It doesn't harm society as a whole. Like you and I have 3 apartments in the world. Are we taking rights away from other people that they can't live there? Not really. We're trying to rent it at reasonable prices. We give it to our friends to stay for free. We go stay there. So we're trying to be as responsible as possible, right? So I think if you're living life in that way and you're just even aware or conscious, how can you doubt whether you're good or bad? If you're doubting whether you're good or bad, it probably comes from an irresponsible. It comes from not an irresponsible source. It comes from an unrealistic source. You know. And nobody but, the beauty of it, nobody but you gets to decide that. And you just have to decide whether you want to believe it or not.
Yeah, I think maybe it does come down to, like, I think your worldview and your judgments are a lot less picky. You know, like it's kind of like you being a family medicine and I'm the rheumatologist and I'm like kind of like super detailed, because you're basically like, you're not hurting anyone, you're not killing anyone, you're not stealing from anyone, you're trying to be kind for the most part, like, so you're good. Like, and my mind's like, no, but you are like this privileged, you know, like just traveling and like, you know, like it's like so.
And then maybe
dismissing all these other aspects.
What if you could be forgiving to yourself and say, hey, maybe you are this privileged, abusive, taking advantage of the world, usurper person. Usurper. And so let's say you are that. Do you think you're the kind of person, if you found out that you actually are that, you would make a change? You would make a real effort to change that?
If I was like,
if it turns out that you are this evil person, bad person, and you are genuinely the kind of person who would want to know that about yourself, would you actually try to change that about yourself?
Yeah.
Of course. So if you have that mindset, is it possible that any decision you make in life is going to take you more towards
you're always worried about the part that you're not aware of, the blind spot.
You can only be aware of what you're aware of. You cannot be aware of what you're not aware of. The things you don't know, you don't know, you don't know. There's no control over that. We're not trying to live the most perfect life. Like I said, in the social media world, everybody but you gets to decide who you are, how you are, what you should do, what you shouldn't do.
Right.
But you got to live this life.
Yeah.
And what you don't know, it's not even important. What you're completely unaware of is not relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like people who are like watching this, like how do you go by intuition, or do you think that it has helped you if you go by intuition, and how do you reckon with like that self-critical aspect of your brain, your
the
thoughts,
second guessing,
you know?
and stuff like that?
Yeah, I definitely am starting to see, not just because I'm around Mo and I really see that he has like this ease and he has this ultimately way of like seeing the world, and which helps him and is really easy to live with and, you know, pleasant to others, but also I think just my own experiences in my life, that there is a value in sort of like being able to just kind of be like, well, I don't know, I can't explain it, like I just feel like doing this, or I just feel like not doing this, and then I think you might be kinder to others who also, you know, are like, I don't know, I can't explain it, whereas like no, you have to be able to analyze and make a informed decision and this and that.
So these are good questions, I think, for anybody listening, for the four of you. Like, how do you make your decisions? Do you feel like you're more of an analytical person, or do you feel you are more of an intuition person? And then in what aspects do you feel you're more analytical, maybe finances, and in what aspects of your life, maybe raising your kids, you're more intuitive? And then finally, do you feel that following one direction versus another has gotten you closer to some semblance of happiness, contentness, feeling better, or do you feel like it's taken you away from it? So I think that's a good way to end this discussion. So you can find out more about Dr. Niloufar Farmani at, she doesn't have a website, but you can find out a lot more about me at digitalnomadphysician.com. You can purchase my one-on-one coaching. That's super affordable now. It's only $500 an hour, $250 for 30 minutes, which is a 50% discount. And you can purchase my online course to start your own online medical practice at digitalnomadphysician.com/course. Take care, guys.